Welcome to her Fireside Stories, the channel where family drama meets heartfelt redemption around the warmth of a comforting fire. Tonight, we dive into an unforgettable tale where secrets, betrayal, and family loyalty collide head on. Imagine sitting at your own family dinner, only for your daughter in law to publicly call you controlling, forcing you to pick up the microphone and unveil her darkest lies right there in front of everyone. But here's the twist. What happens when, years later, that same woman who shattered your family returns unexpectedly, begging forgiveness and promising change? Will her pleas heal old wounds, or will they only deepen the scars? Listen carefully to this gripping narrative to discover how one grandmother's courage exposes hidden deceptions, reshapes her son's destiny, and safeguards her grandson's future. I invite you to join our community, subscribe to her Fireside Stories, and hit the bell icon to stay updated with more powerful stories like this. Don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts and tell us where you're listening from. I'd love to see how far our fireside warmth has spread. Now, settle in and let tonight's story begin. You've destroyed this family, Harriet, and everyone knows it. The words echoed off the chandelier in my dining room, slicing through the stunned silence that fell after my daughter-in-law's brazen toast. My heart hammered. For a moment, I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. You see, I'm Harriet Ellington, 61 years old, wearing my newly trimmed silver bob with quiet confidence, a look I'd adopted shortly after my beloved husband, Bartholomew, passed away. We'd been married 35 years. He was the steadfast hero of my life, and losing him felt like losing my own reflection. I'd always been strong, but his absence carved a hollow place inside me I wasn't sure would ever heal. My son, Jonah Ellington, just had his first child with his wife, Rosalind. Jonah inherited his father's tall frame and calm demeanor, though his hair is cut in a neat, modern style, not Bartholomew's salt and pepper waves. Rosalind, on the other hand, is as refined as a magazine cover. Her cascading auburn locks are always meticulously styled in layered waves that frame her face with a sort of polished perfection. Yet beneath that stylish exterior, I've sensed an unsettling edge from the moment we met. Nothing overt, but little remarks here, a pointed look there, always made me feel like I was competing with her for Jonah's loyalty. For this reason, I'd planned the welcome dinner for my grandson, Corbin, with both excitement and trepidation. I spent days cooking, arranging flowers, and polishing heirloom silverware. The chandelier above the dining table, a relic from a trip Bartholomew and I took to an antique market in France, reflected a soft glow, promising a moment of pure family bliss. At least, that was my hope. Then Rosalind raised her glass. At first, her voice was all sugary politeness, but her toast suddenly turned sharp. She called me a control freak, the one who clings to every cent of the family fortune. Everyone's eyes fell on me, Everett and Genevieve, my brother and sister-in-law, Clara and Darius, dear friends from church, and, most heartbreakingly, my son, Jonah. I saw conflict in his eyes, but also a flicker of doubt he'd been nursing for far too long. My pulse pounded as I reached for the microphone we'd placed beside the dessert table. If Rosalind wanted to wage this battle publicly, I would finish it the same way. I stepped forward, the microphone chilling my hand, and took a shaky breath. My mind flickered back to the countless sacrifices I'd made for Jonah's happiness, long hours working alongside Bartholomew to ensure we could send our only son to a top university, the times I'd canceled my own plans to help him move from one dorm to another, the nights I'd spent consoling him when heartbreak first found him at 17. All of that love, all of that dedication, somehow twisted into accusations of controlling behavior. Bartholomew's absence weighed more heavily on me in that moment. If he were here, He'd know exactly what to say. He had a knack for handling conflict with calm clarity. But even without him, I decided enough was enough. Rosalind was not going to rewrite my story or tarnish my husband's legacy with her manipulative tactics. Thank you, Rosalind, I began, voice steadier than my trembling insides. I appreciate your candor. And since you've opened this conversation, I believe it's time we all had some honesty. I saw Jonah's eyes widen. Across the table, Rosalind's lips tightened. She probably expected me to shrivel under her harsh words, but something in me had finally snapped. The hush in the dining room was palpable. Nobody breathed. Nobody spoke. Even the baby, Corbin, seemed to sense the tension as he dozed in his carrier. For years, I'd listened to half-truths and snide remarks from Rosalind. I'd kept silent for the sake of family harmony. But when she publicly called me a controlling matriarch, I realized the only way to salvage whatever remained of my relationship with Jonah and my chance to be a part of Corbin's life was to expose the secrets she had so carefully kept in the dark. Jonah opened his mouth as if to speak, but closed it again, uncertain. The hush deepened, like we were all on the brink of a precipice. Assayan. I tightened my grip on the mic and glanced at each person around the table. Every beloved face twisted with shock or dread. This was about to change everything. 5 years ago, when Bartholomew died, I learned just how vital a carefully planned inheritance could be. He'd set up a trust for Jonah, ensuring that the funds would be released in increments major life events, educational milestones, or property purchases that built toward Jonah's long-term security and, one day, Corbin's. I know you'll protect him. Harriet, Bartholomew had told me on his final afternoon in the hospital. You've always been the glue in this family. He squeezed my hand, weak from his illness but strong in spirit. Don't let anyone dismantle what we built. At the time, I assumed he meant unscrupulous relatives or the chaos that can follow a large inheritance. Little did I realize the challenge would come from within our own home. A year after Bartholomew's passing, Jonah introduced me to Rosalind. She walked in with designer heels and a bright smile that never fully reached her eyes. She'd pinned her luxurious auburn hair in a half-up style that day, presenting an air of elegance that made me think of movie stars. At first, I was thrilled. Jonah looked happy, and for a mother grieving her husband, seeing her son so elated was a comforting sight. Yet small tensions arose quickly. Rosalind bristled when I'd check on them or ask about their future plans, interpreting it as me meddling in their affairs. I chalked it up to personality differences, thinking we'd settle into a comfortable in-law relationship over time. But then, suspicious things started happening. Jonah stopped calling me as often. Whenever I'd invite them for a casual Sunday dinner, Rosalind declined, citing exhaustion or urgent errands. Jonah once confronted me about harassing his wife regarding their spending habits. I was baffled. I hadn't called Rosalind at all, much less about money. Confused, I dropped the subject to keep the peace, but a cold dread settled in my stomach. Something was off. Standing there in front of my stunned guests, I realized this was the moment to lay bare everything I'd discovered. The question was, would Jonah believe me? Or would Rosalind's hold on him prove too powerful? Rosalind calls me controlling, I said, my tone resonating through the microphone. But what she doesn't mention is the hidden credit cards, the mysterious debts, and her relentless attempts to undermine the legal trust my husband left for Jonah. A collective gasp rippled around the table. Rosalind's face went from cocky to ashen in mere seconds. Everett, my brother, who sports a close-cropped salt and pepper buzz cut, exchanged a worried glance with his wife, Genevieve, known for her impeccably pinned updo. It was as though they'd suspected something was amiss, but never guessed how far it went. Beside me, Clara, one of my oldest friends and a fellow widow who wears her gray curls short and practical, whispered, "Stay strong, Harriet." While placing a reassuring hand on my arm, I drew courage from her presence. Assumo. Darius, another family friend, shifted uneasily in his seat, adjusting the collar of his shirt. Everyone sensed the powder keg about to explode. Jonah stood abruptly, nearly toppling his chair. "Mom, what are you talking about?" He looked at Rosalind, then back at me. I could almost see his mind racing to reconcile the woman he loved with the allegations I was hurling her way. Corbin let out a soft whimper, as if even the baby felt the tension. "Jonah, I never meddled in your marriage," I said, "but I couldn't stand by and watch Rosalind chip away at your financial stability at Corbin's future." Slowly, I reached for the folder I'd stashed behind the floral centerpiece. My heart pounded. My hands trembled, but I was resolute. These are the bank statements, the credit reports, and the lawyer's letters discussing how the trust can be bypassed. I discovered them over the last several months. Rosalind's eyes widened. She tried to snatch the folder from my hand, but Jonah was quicker. He thumbed through the documents, his expression darkening with each page. For a moment, everything froze. Even the chandelier seemed to dim, as if it, too, braced for the fallout. The betrayal in Jonah's eyes mirrored my own heartbreak. I waited, breath held, for Rosalind's next move. Rosalind's face shifted from shock to defiance. Her meticulously coiffed auburn waves seemed to bristle as she snatched her own wine glass, downing its contents in one gulp. "Jonah, don't listen to her," she hissed. "She's hated me from the start, always wanting to keep you under her thumb." She shot me a glare laced with venom, as if I were some arch nemesis rather than a mother who only wanted her son's happiness. "You know she's resentful that I have access to this family's wealth now." Jonah's eyes scanned the documents again, pausing on an itemized bank statement listing purchases he'd never authorized. "I never saw these charges," he muttered, looking disoriented. "Rosalind, how is there a department store expense for thousands of dollars in my name? We agreed we were on a budget after Corbin was born. And what's this invoice for a high-end lawyer you met with in private?" She opened her mouth to reply, but no words came out, just a flicker of panic. I could almost hear her calculating her next lie, deciding which detail she might still be able to spin. But with so many witnesses, so many documents, it was clear the jig was up. "All those times I tried to warn you." "Jonah," I said softly, my voice wavering with a mix of sadness and relief. I tried to drop hints that something wasn't right, but I couldn't prove it until now. And I was terrified you'd push me away if I confronted Rosalind too directly. Rosalind slammed her glass down, making the silverware rattle. "If you'd let me handle our finances without meddling, Jonah, we'd be better off. But your mother inserted herself into everything, prying, judging, controlling." Her eyes darted to the envelope in Jonah's hand, as if she might lunge for it again. Everett cleared his throat, his strong arms folded. "That's enough," he said, his voice carrying a quiet authority. "This is a family matter, but Harriet has obviously found something serious. Denying it won't make it go away." Genevieve, twisting the pen in her updo, looked both horrified and sympathetic. "Let's all calm down for Corbin's sake," she suggested. But the storm had only begun. In the heat of that escalating family drama, I felt an unexpected surge of courage. I was tired of being painted as the villain when all I'd ever done was love my son unconditionally. The memory of Bartholomew on his final days, urging me to protect Jonah, guided me like a beacon. So I straightened my posture, took a breath, and began the truth-telling in earnest. "I have the power to release funds from the trust. I addressed the whole table, but only under certain strict conditions that Bartholomew and I agreed upon. That includes educational expenses, property investments for Jonah and Corbin's stable future, and later, Corbin's own educational funds. It was never meant for frivolous spending sprees or sneaky get-rich-quick schemes. Rosalind has been trying to sabotage those conditions behind Jonah's back. Jonah's face paled. I could see the silent question in his eyes. How far does Rosalind's deception go? Before he could ask, however, Rosalind flung her napkin onto her plate and lurched to her feet. You act like I'm the only one who's ever spent this family's money. You bought that ridiculous chandelier, Harriet, and who knows how much that cost. You showered Jonah with every possible advantage in life, and now you resent that I'm entitled to some of it as his wife. She practically spat out the words. My knuckles whitened around the microphone. There's a difference between a family investing together and what you've done. Rosalind, I replied firmly, we're all willing to spend money on things that enrich our lives or bring us closer. But you've used deception and manipulation to line your own pockets. Jonah reached over and gently touched Rosalind's arm. Is that true? He asked, voice cracking. Is what Mom's saying really happening? Because these documents... He stared at them again, eyes full of betrayal. You promised me you had everything under control. Rosalind jerked away from his grasp. I'm not staying here to be humiliated, she announced, ready to bolt from the table. But I wasn't finished. Clutching the mic with renewed determination, I prepared to reveal the final damning piece of evidence. Wait. My voice was uncharacteristically commanding, stopping Rosalind in her tracks. She turned around slowly, the glare in her eyes as fiery as her flowing auburn waves. You've had your say, I continued, gently setting the microphone down. Now hear mine. Everyone deserves to know exactly how we reached this point. I opened a second folder hidden beneath the first. It contained records of emails between Rosalind and her confidant, someone I couldn't quite identify, where she explicitly discussed forcing my hand to sell off certain family properties. The intention was clear. She wanted to leverage them for quick cash, presumably before Jonah ever realized anything was amiss. The properties included the very cabin in the mountains Bartholomew had surprised me with for our 20th anniversary, a place brimming with memories of Jonah's childhood. Selling our family's cabin. Jonah's voice cracked as he read over my shoulder. His gaze snapped to Rosalind. You told me that place meant nothing to you, but you knew how much it meant to me. This whole time you wanted to flip it for a profit behind my back. She's lying, Rosalind said, but I could hear the waver in her tone. Or maybe she's forging emails. I wouldn't put it past her. She hates me, Jonah. She's not the one who lied about credit card bills and legal consultations. Everett interjected. As my older brother, he'd known me all my life, and he wore a fierce protective expression. I'm looking at the official letterheads and timestamps right here. Rosalind's chest heaved, eyes darting left and right. The dinner guests, once a cheerful gathering, were now collectively stunned. Darius cleared his throat, trying to diffuse the tension. But there was no light-hearted quip that could salvage this train wreck of a night. We can deal with this tomorrow, quietly. Rosalind attempted, desperation creeping into her voice. Jonah, you don't want to ruin Corbin's welcome dinner, do you? She reached out to stroke Corbin's carrier handle, as if brandishing her motherhood like a shield. But Jonah shook his head. You already ruined it, he said softly, heartbreak tinging every syllable. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes as I watched Jonah's shoulders slump. Every maternal instinct in me wanted to rush forward and hug him, to assure him this nightmare would pass. But I stayed rooted by the table, giving him space to absorb the shock. Genevieve rose quietly, whispering to Everett that they should take their leave. But Jonah motioned for them to stay, as if needing witnesses to the raw truth unraveling before him. Clara, her soft gray curls bobbing with concern, approached me. "Harriet, dear," she murmured, "maybe we should continue this later, in private. Everyone's had quite a scare tonight." She shot a meaningful glance at baby Corbin, sleeping through all the turmoil with an infant's blessed ignorance. Part of me agreed. Another part, the one that had been systematically gaslit by Rosalind's insinuations and lies, refused to let the moment go without resolution. "There's no going back," I said, voice hollow. "If we stop now, we'll just pretend tomorrow that nothing happened, and this wedge will only grow deeper." Bartholomew wanted me to protect Jonah's future, to protect Corbin's future. I won't let him down. Jonah took a trembling breath. "I need to know everything. Mom, no more half measures." If Rosalind's done these things, if he hesitated, as if the very word it formed a crack in his chest, I need to see it all. Rosalind's lips curled in a sneer. "Don't you realize, Jonah, that she's trying to come between us? I told you this from the beginning. Your mother has a controlling streak. She's furious. She can't hold all the purse strings anymore. She'll say anything to break us up so she can have you and that money all to herself." A wave of righteous anger pulsed through me. "I wish I didn't have to say any of this," I retorted, scanning the room. "But how else can I stop the lies?" The tension grew thick as an electrical storm building in the summer sky. Even the chandelier seemed to flicker, as though uncertain whether to continue illuminating such a heartbreaking scene. In the aftermath of that confrontation, something unexpected happened. Rosalind went silent, her face contorted between rage and fear. The hush stretched on, so potent that I swore I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the next room. Finally, she let out a breath, tossing her hair back. "Fine," she said, voice cracking. "If we're doing this, let's do it." She swiveled toward Jonah, her expression a strange blend of defiance and vulnerability. "Yes, I've spent money, more money than I should have. But it's not what your mother thinks. I'm not just burning through your inheritance for vanity. I I grew up with nothing. Jonah, my parents struggled to keep a roof over our heads. I swore I'd never live like that again." Part of me almost felt pity. I remembered Jonah telling me a vague story about Rosalind's difficult childhood, but pity wasn't enough to excuse outright theft and deceit, especially when Corbin's future was at stake. "Then why not come to me?" Jonah asked, his voice laced with genuine confusion. "Why all the secrecy?" He lifted the pages of her lawyer consultations. "Going behind my back to see how you could control the trust, plotting to sell my mother's cabin." He paused, tears glistening in his eyes. "That's not protecting yourself. That's betraying the person you married." Before Rosalind could respond, Genevieve approached with gentle steps. "Jonah, sweetheart, maybe we should move Corbin to a quieter room. He doesn't need to be in the middle of all this tension." Rosalind's eyes flickered as though she might protest, but she said nothing. Jonah nodded and carefully carried Corbin's carrier into the adjacent living room. Suddenly, we were left in a circle: Rosalind, Everett, Genevieve, Clara, Darius, and me. None of us quite knew what to do or say. This was Rosalind's moment. If there was any remorse, any genuine desire to fix this, it had to start now. So we all stood there, waiting for her next words, unsure whether we'd hear the truth or yet another fabrication. Rosalind sank into a chair, her once proud posture deflated. She raked her manicured nails through her hair, messing up the waves she'd spent so much time perfecting. "I didn't plan for it to go this far," she said, barely above a whisper. I thought, I thought I could manage it. The credit cards, the quick loans, it was supposed to be temporary. Then, when Corbin came, Everything got more complicated. I couldn't keep up with the bills. I needed more money. Her explanation tugged at the corner of my heart, but I remained guarded. I'd seen too many manipulative turns from her to let sympathy overshadow the facts. Everett, silent until now, stepped forward. Rosalind, there's a difference between a rough patch and calculated deception. These documents Harriet found show not just debt, but strategic steps to gain control of the trust, like scheduling meetings with lawyers who specialize in dissolving or overriding trust conditions. Rosalind looked down, her chin trembling. Yes, because Harriet refused to release more funds. She's your gatekeeper. If Jonah and I are building a future, why shouldn't we have access? Why is Harriet in charge of how we spend our own money exchanging a glance with Everett? I felt years of frustration bubble up. It's not your own money in the sense you're implying. It's a family trust, set up to preserve these assets for generations. If you had approached me honestly, I might have considered some kind of assistance, but you lied. Clara nodded, stepping closer. Rosalind, sweetheart, every family has its complexities, but honesty is what keeps us together. Her gentle nature could disarm almost anyone, but Rosalind stayed tense, perched on the edge of the chair as though poised to flee. In the next room, I could hear Jonah murmuring softly to Corbin, the baby fussing. Part of me longed to join them, to cradle my grandson and shield him from all this turmoil, but I had a responsibility to finish what Rosalind started. Because one thing was certain after tonight, our family could never be the same again. Just then, Jonah stepped back into the dining room, a new resolve etched on his face. He'd placed Corbin in a quiet corner of the living room, presumably where the baby could rest undisturbed. Rosalind, he said, crossing his arms over his chest, we have to talk about this like adults. Screaming and blaming my mother isn't going to solve anything. Her gaze flickered toward him, uncertain. You're siding with her. I'm siding with the truth, he replied firmly, and it hurts me more than you know to find out you've been hiding these debts. I would have helped. Mom would have helped. But instead, you turned me against her. I exhaled, remembering how quickly Jonah had changed after marrying Rosalind. His phone calls dwindled. He stopped visiting for Sunday dinners, claiming conflict after conflict that Rosalind insisted was urgent. 1,000 small wounds that led to an unspoken chasm. Now, seeing Jonah stand there, confronting her lies, I realized how long he must have been quietly questioning the narrative Rosalind fed him. Rosalind pressed her hands to her face, wiping away tears, though whether they were of genuine remorse or desperation. I couldn't be certain. Jonah, I was scared. I didn't want you to think I married you for the money. I thought if I could just fix things on my own, we'd never have to involve your mother's trust. But when the bills kept piling up, a sympathetic hush fell. Darius tentatively reached out and set a hand on Jonah's shoulder. She's your wife, Jonah, he said, and that means something. But the betrayal here is real. You need to figure out if you two can move past this. Jonah clenched his jaw, glancing at me. I gave him the faintest nod, as if to say, I'll support whatever you decide. My mind spun with the memory of Bartholomew's final words, of how he trusted me to keep Jonah safe. I wondered if this was the moment he had feared the day we'd discover a predator right under our roof, disguised as family. Rosalind's shoulders shook as she let out a ragged sigh. I can't lose you, Jonah. I can't lose Corbin, this family, even Harriet, for all our differences. But I don't know how to make things right. She grasped at the hem of her designer blouse, eyes haunted. If there's any chance left, I want it. A weighted silence wrapped around us. I looked at Jonah, heartbreak etched in every line of his face, his gaze locked with mine, searching for direction, for hope, but I had no easy answers. All I could do was silently affirm that I loved him and wanted the best for him and for Corbin, who deserved a family that wasn't tainted by relentless deceit. Everett cleared his throat. Perhaps we should get the legal side sorted first. Harriet, you have control over the trust. We can consult the family lawyer about next steps. Jonah, you should look at your personal finances to see what's salvageable. If you both decide you can salvage your marriage, it needs to be built on honesty from here on. Rosalind sniffled, nodding weakly. I'll cooperate, whatever it takes, she whispered. Jonah, still guarded, slipped a comforting arm around her shoulders. Part of me was relieved. Perhaps the road to redemption was possible. Yes, ho. Part of me remained wary. I'd witnessed how cunning Rosalind could be. Would she revert to old habits once the heat died down? That night, everyone filtered out one by one: Everett, Genevieve, Clara, and Darius, leaving Jonah, Rosalind, baby Corbin, and me in an uneasy hush. The dining room felt hollow, with half-eaten plates of food and toppled glasses standing as silent witnesses to the drama that had unfolded. Finally, Jonah broke the quiet, Mom. Can you watch Corbin for a moment? Rosalind and I need to talk privately. I agreed, gathering the baby into my arms. At that moment, for all the tension, I felt a profound wave of love for this little boy. If anything good could come from the night's revelations, it would be forging a safer future for him. Over the next few weeks, a strange, fragile peace settled over our household. Jonah and Rosalind chose to remain together under my roof temporarily, an arrangement meant to save on expenses while they sorted out the financial mess. It was odd, having them in the same space, tiptoeing around each other's emotional wounds. Yet there was also an odd sense of relief. For the first time in years, the lies weren't festering unseen. They'd been dragged into the open where we could actually address them. Corbin, blissfully unaware of the tension, became the glue that forced us into small, cooperative acts: bottle warming, diaper changes, late-night rocking sessions. I cherished every moment with him, learning the cadence of his hungry cries, the quiet coos he made when content. Meanwhile, Jonah spent evenings combing through financial statements, determined to understand the full extent of Rosalind's debts. Rosalind hovered between contrition and defensiveness, occasionally snapping that she was tired of being watched so closely. I remained cautious but tried to keep the peace. One morning, as I was dusting the antique frames on the mantel, I found Jonah in the living room, sifting through receipts Rosalind had hidden in an old shoebox. He rubbed the bridge of his nose in frustration. Mom, he said, the debts are worse than we thought, over $40,000 on various credit cards. All in my name. My heart sank. Jonah, I'm so sorry. Is there any feasible plan to pay it off? I'm meeting with a financial advisor tomorrow, he replied, eyes clouded. Rosalind's gone to see if her old job will give her more hours. She says she wants to fix this, but he trailed off, and I placed a hand on his shoulder. Actions speak louder than words, I said gently. I hope she means what she says. At dinner that night, with Corbin babbling in his high chair, Rosalind promised she'd do whatever it took to right her wrongs. Yet the tension remained heavy, unspoken doubts trailing every conversation like a shadow. I found myself praying that she would truly change for Jonah's sake, for Corbin's sake, and for her own. 2 months later, just when it seemed like we might reach a fragile new normal, a storm blew in from an unexpected direction. Rosalind's estranged sister, Audra, arrived at our doorstep. She looked eerily like Rosalind, sharing those same thick auburn waves, though she wore them in a looser, more carefree style. Instead of the sharp designer clothes Rosalind preferred, Audra wore a simple floral dress and sneakers. Her expression was a mixture of relief and apprehension. Rosalind's sister, Jonah repeated, blinking. He'd never heard much about her. I noticed Rosalind stiffen as soon as she caught wind of Audra's presence. Clearly, there was bad blood in their past. Audra hesitated at the threshold. I'm sorry for intruding, Bagome, but I needed to talk to you, she said, glancing nervously at Rosalind. I couldn't ignore what I've been hearing. People said Rosalind married into money. She winced. Let me just say I've seen a pattern with her in the past, and I felt it was my duty to warn you. Rosalind stepped forward, eyes blazing. You have no right to show up here. Audra, you turned your back on me years ago. Audra's face softened. You know that's not entirely true. You pushed me away. I tried to help you out of that fiasco with your ex, but you refused. Jonah and I exchanged a quick, uneasy glance. Rosalind's ex. She'd once told us she'd never been married before. Could it be she'd lied about that? Too, I need to know, Jonah said, pulling Audra aside. Wopomo. If there's something I should be aware of, Rosalind lunged for him, voice frantic. Don't listen to her, Jonah. She just wants to paint me as the villain, like she always does. But Jonah disentangled himself from her grasp, face set with determination. My heart ached. He'd once adored every part of Rosalind, and now the trust between them was frayed almost to breaking. Corbin began to wail from the living room, as if he sensed the emotional turbulence. In that moment, I knew the shaky peace we'd built was about to crumble completely. With Corbin crying in the background, Jonah grabbed the diaper bag and retreated to calm him, leaving me alone with Rosalind and Audra. My throat felt tight, the tension so thick I could barely breathe. Audra shifted from foot to foot, her expression torn between compassion and resolve. Rosalind glared at her sister, fists clenched at her sides. Why are you here? Rosalind spat. To gloat, to make my life harder than it already is. Audra drew a shaky breath. I came because I didn't want you to destroy another family. After what happened with Henry. Shut up. Rosalind shrieked, her voice jagged. She advanced on Audra with such fury that I instinctively stepped between them, placing a hand on Rosalind's shoulder. Rosalind, you need to calm down, I said quietly. Whatever happened in your past, we deserve to know. Jonah deserves to know. As soon as those words left my mouth, I felt a flicker of guilt. Was I overstepping? But no, this was our home, and the secrecy was poisoning us all. Audra exhaled slowly, her eyes glistening. All right, here it is. Henry was Rosalind's previous husband. She married him for financial security. Things started off okay, but when the money began to dry up, she swallowed. She found ways to manipulate the situation. Eventually, it fell apart. Henry's family pressed charges for fraud, though it never went to trial because Rosalind disappeared. I tried to reach her, to talk her into making amends. She vanished again. Next thing I knew, she married Jonah. The silence rang in my ears. Rosalind's breathing was ragged, and I felt her trembling under my hand. Then, with a furious shrug, she pulled away. You're exaggerating, she whispered. But the defeated look in her eyes told me there was more truth than lie in Audra's story. Henry was controlling. I had no choice. Audra's gaze hardened. You always have a choice. Rosalind, always. My mind reeled. If this was true, then Rosalind's pattern of deception stretched far beyond what I'd ever imagined. And Jonah, dear Jonah, had no clue how deep it went. Jonah returned just then, cradling a calmer but still fretful Corbin. He wore the expression of a man who'd walked into a battlefield with no exit plan. Mom, he said, voice tight. What's going on? I could hear shouting from the hall. I turned to Audra, giving her the floor. She cleared her throat, quickly reiterating the main points of her story: how Rosalind had deceived Henry, how she fled when financial hardship struck, and how she'd apparently repeated the cycle with Jonah. Each sentence landed like a hammer, forging new cracks in the fragile bond between Rosalind and Jonah. Rosalind looked at him, desperation shadowing her face. "Don't you see? Jonah. She's twisting the story. Henry was the abusive one. I had to run. She never believed me because she always took his family's side." She glanced at me, tearful. "You're also quick to believe the worst about me." Audra's face twisted in concern. "Rosalind, I'm not saying Henry was a saint, but you took advantage of him financially. It's all documented. He gave you everything and you left him in ruin. Now I see you doing the same to Jonah. I just wanted to warn him." My chest pounded as I caught Jonah's eyes. It pained me to see the heartbreak welling there. For a moment, I prayed that somehow Rosalind's version was the truth, that she was just a wounded soul escaping a traumatic past. But my intuition, honed by a year of suspicious behaviors, screamed otherwise. "You told me you'd never been married," Jonah said to Rosalind, voice heavy with betrayal, "that Henry was just a boyfriend from college. Were you lying all along?" Rosalind shook her head, tears streaming. I was ashamed. Jonah, I wanted to start fresh. Yes, I married Henry, but it ended horribly. I didn't want you to think less of me." Jonah took a shaky breath. "And you claimed my mother was the manipulative one. How do I know any part of our relationship was real at all?" Rosalind blinked, anguish twisting her features. She had no easy answer, and the silence that followed was more damning than any accusation. Audra stepped back, glancing at me with apologetic eyes. "I'm sorry for dropping this bombshell. I couldn't stand by anymore. Not after what happened before." She fidgeted with the hem of her floral dress. "I think I'll go. Jonah, Harriet, I'm sorry if this caused more pain, but the truth needed to be told." With that, she headed for the door, leaving the rest of us suspended in the aftermath of her revelations. Jonah stood there, Corbin fussing in his arms, while Rosalind sank against the wall, wiping at her tears. I wanted to reach out to Jonah, to console him, but something in his eyes told me to stay back. He needed space to process. I remembered how strong Bartholomew was in times of crisis, how he gave Jonah the right balance of space and support. I tried to channel that same calm. "You lied about your marriage," Jonah finally said, voice drained. "You lied about finances. You tried to pin everything on my mom." He swallowed hard. I can't keep living like this. Rosalind." His words felt like a devastating final blow. Rosalind gasped, covering her mouth, as though his statement literally stole her breath. Setting Corbin in his carrier, Jonah brushed past Rosalind into the kitchen. I followed, worried he might do something rash. "Jonah, wait," I called gently, stepping into the warm glow of the kitchen lights. He leaned on the counter, shoulders trembling. "I don't know what to do," he said. "I love my son more than anything, but the woman I married, who is she? Mom. Everything I thought I knew has been turned upside down." I placed a tentative hand on his back. "Sometimes, the only way to heal is to let the truth come out fully. If she won't own up to everything she's done, it's up to you to protect yourself and Corbin. I'll stand by you, whatever you decide." Rosalind appeared at the doorway, eyes rimmed red. "Jonah, I'm sorry," she whispered, voice barely audible, but the question weighing on all our minds was whether sorry would ever be enough. The following week was a surreal blur of guarded interactions and painful silences. Rosalind holed up in the guest room, emerging mainly to care for Corbin or to stand awkwardly by Jonah's side during tense legal appointments. Jonah pushed forward with a lawyer to sort through the debts, and to ensure there was no further tampering with the trust Bartholomew had established, I offered what support I could, but I sensed Jonah needed to handle much of this alone to reclaim the autonomy Rosalind had compromised. The day before we had our next major legal meeting, Rosalind vanished. She left a note on the kitchen table. "I can't do this anymore. I love Corbin, and I love you, Jonah, but I can't face the constant suspicion and judgment. I need space." My stomach twisted into knots reading those words. Jonah's face was unreadable, but I could see the heartbreak in his eyes. "She's gone," he said quietly, picking up the note. "She didn't even say where she was going." He lifted his gaze to me. "Mom, what does this mean? Is she coming back?" My heart clenched. I thought of Audra's story, how Rosalind had disappeared after things went south with Henry. It seemed like a pattern repeating itself. "I don't know," I replied, grief thickening my voice. "But we have to look after Corbin. He's your priority now." Jonah hugged the note to his chest for a moment, then gently set it down. We stood in silence, trying to absorb yet another turn in this relentless saga. That night, while Jonah tried to coax Corbin to sleep, I found myself alone in the living room, staring at pictures of our once happy family. There was Jonah at his college graduation, beaming with possibility. There was Bartholomew, arm around me on our anniversary trip, both of us so full of life. And now, everything had crumbled in a matter of months. 3 days passed with no word from Rosalind. Jonah swung between anger, worry, and a strange sense of liberation. "Maybe it's better this way," he muttered one morning as we sipped coffee in the kitchen. "Corbin bouncing in a baby seat at our feet. I don't want Corbin growing up with all that toxicity, but I also hate that his mother vanished without a goodbye." I reached over and squeezed Jonah's arm. "If she truly loved him, I believe she'll come back eventually. Maybe she needs time to confront her demons. Until then, Corbin has you and he has me." Jonah nodded, expression somber. He got a part-time job to help pay off the lingering debts, even though the trust could have covered some of it. "I want to handle my own mistakes," he explained, a faint determination returning to his eyes. In a way, I admired his resolve. He was forging a path forward, piece by painful piece. We contacted Audra, who confirmed she hadn't heard from Rosalind since the night she visited. "That's typical for her," Audra admitted ruefully. "When things get too tough, she bolts." Still, she offered to help Jonah if he needed statements or evidence about Rosalind's past for any custody disputes that might arise. One evening, Everett and Genevieve invited us over for a small barbecue, hoping a change of scenery would lighten our spirits. I watched Jonah handle Corbin with a tenderness and competence that made me proud. Genevieve asked how he was coping, and Jonah shrugged. "It's hard, but at least now I know the truth. I'd rather wrestle with a harsh reality than live in a beautiful lie." Later, while Genevieve served dessert, she pulled me aside. "You did the right thing. Harriet," she said softly, her pinned-up hair catching the glow of the patio lights. "It's tragic that Rosalind is gone, but you saved Jonah from more serious harm financially and emotionally." I tried to smile, but a lump caught in my throat. Had I truly done the right thing, or had I driven my own daughter-in-law away, despite her treachery? Part of me felt sad that she'd chosen to vanish instead of seeking redemption. A few weeks later, we got the inevitable news Rosalind had filed for divorce and full custody in absentia, no less. It turned out she'd found an aggressive lawyer willing to push for extreme measures, claiming Jonah was emotionally unfit and that I was the meddlesome grandmother endangering Corbin. We were blindsided. How could she file for full custody when she'd abandoned Corbin? The legal proceedings were a nightmare. Jonah spent hours assembling evidence of Rosalind's financial deception and her abrupt disappearance. Audra provided key testimony, detailing Rosalind's pattern of fleeing marriages and draining resources. I brought forth every document proving how the trust was designed for Corbin's benefit and how Rosalind's manipulations risked that future. The weeks turned into months, each court date more emotionally draining than the last. Jonah oscillated between heartbreak because, despite everything, he'd once loved Rosalind and a fierce protectiveness for Corbin. I busied myself caring for my grandson, filling my days with diaper changes, lullabies, and the sweet smell of baby shampoo. It was a refuge from the turmoil swirling around us. Then, a turning point. Rosalind's lawyer withdrew from the case when inconsistencies in Rosalind's claims became too apparent. She was unreachable, failing to respond to court summonses or provide her new address. The judge, unimpressed by her tactics, awarded Jonah temporary sole custody until Rosalind could present herself in person and prove her claims. It felt like a small beacon of light in a very dark tunnel. The irony was that Rosalind had done all of this to secure a financial future, but her very actions had jeopardized that same future. Standing outside the courthouse one chilly afternoon, I could almost imagine Bartholomew's warm hand on my shoulder, whispering that we'd done the right thing protecting Jonah and Corbin. I closed my eyes, breathing a sigh of relief. At least, for now, the worst seemed over. But it wasn't exactly closure. Rosalind was still out there, her threats lingering in the air, and the question remained if she returned someday. Would she bring renewed chaos, or would she finally seek genuine redemption? Time is a peculiar balm. 6 months slipped by, and the intensity of Rosalind's betrayal slowly dulled to an ache, like a bruise that's no longer fresh. Jonah and I settled into a workable routine. He took on more hours at the local marketing firm, proving himself an asset and earning a promotion. I handled Corbin during the day, relishing each giggle, each new milestone. In the evenings, Jonah reclaimed fatherly duties, giving me some time to myself, time I often spent writing in my journal or revisiting old photo albums of Bartholomew and me. Despite everything, there was a sense of peace blossoming in our home. Out of nowhere, Audra reappeared, but this time with hopeful news. She'd gotten a cryptic postcard from Rosalind, postmarked from a city in the Southwest, with a simple message: "I'm sorry for everything. Working on myself. Tell Jonah I love Corbin. Nothing more. No return address. No phone number." Jonah read the postcard with a mixture of relief and heartbreak. "At least she's alive," he murmured, tears shining in his eyes. "I hope she's really getting help." Weeks later, we received legal confirmation that Rosalind had effectively withdrawn her custody claim, either intentionally or by defaulting. The courts awarded Jonah permanent sole custody unless Rosalind reinitiated proceedings. It was bittersweet. Nobody wanted Corbin to grow up without a mother. But we also couldn't subject him to a life of instability or manipulative games. In this new normal, we began rebuilding. Jonah opened his own savings account, determined to establish an independent future. We occasionally tapped into the trust for necessary expenses like Corbin's medical checkups and an educational savings plan, but it all followed Bartholomew's guidelines. Each time I signed a document as the trust executor, I silently thanked my late husband for having the foresight to protect our family from unpredictable storms. Genevieve, Everett, Clara, and Darius became a support network of sorts. They visited often, bringing homemade meals, sharing stories about simpler times, and helping us believe in love and family again. As for me, I felt a new sense of purpose. I was not only a grandmother, but also the gatekeeper of Bartholomew's legacy, a role I carried with quiet pride. One crisp autumn afternoon, I found myself in the garden, snipping roses to bring inside for the dining table. Corbin, now a bubbly toddler, waddled about, occasionally plopping down onto the grass with peals of laughter. Jonah was mowing the lawn, his expression peaceful despite the trials of the past year. My mind drifted to Rosalind. Where was she? Was she truly working on herself, or was that just another illusion? Just then, Jonah shut off the mower, wiping sweat from his brow. "Mom, you okay?" he asked gently. He'd grown attuned to my quiet moments of reverie, often guessing I was thinking about Bartholomew or Rosalind. I nodded, giving him a reassuring smile. Later, over lemonade in the kitchen, I noticed how strong Jonah had become, not just physically, but emotionally. The heartbreak had remolded him into a more introspective, empathetic man. He'd also cut his hair slightly shorter, a practical style that suited his busy single father life. A glimmer of pride swelled in my chest. That evening, Everett and Genevieve dropped by unannounced, bringing a homemade casserole. Genevieve's pinned-up hair was now streaked with a soft silver, and Everett's buzz cut revealed more grays than before. They greeted Corbin with wide smiles, marveled at how much he'd grown, and joined us around the kitchen table. As dinner wrapped up, Genevieve cleared her throat. "We were wondering if you'd consider hosting Thanksgiving here this year, Harriet. It's always been the family hub, and we could all use a warm gathering." My heart fluttered. Memories of past Thanksgivings with Bartholomew rushed in his booming laugh, the way he carved the turkey with meticulous care. "I'd like that," I said, trying not to tear up. "It's time we had a real celebration again." Jonah squeezed my hand under the table. "We'll make new memories," he murmured, and I believed him. Because while we'd lost something intangible when Rosalind vanished, we'd gained clarity, unity, and hope for a better tomorrow. And that, I realized, was what Bartholomew had wanted all along. Thanksgiving came in a rustle of golden leaves and comforting aromas. The smell of roasting turkey, simmering gravy, and pumpkin pie filled my home, blending with laughter and conversation. It felt like old times, except with a new appreciation for how fragile happiness can be. Everett and Genevieve arrived first, lugging side dishes galore. Clara and Darius followed, bearing wine and a dessert platter. Jonah kept Corbin entertained in the living room. Wearing his hair a bit longer now, he told me he found a stylish barber in town who specialized in modern cuts that still looked professional. As everyone settled around the table, the chandelier overhead cast a warm glow on the polished silverware and crisp tablecloth. I thought back to that disastrous dinner almost a year prior. The same chandelier had witnessed Rosalind's venomous toast. Now it was illuminating a scene of reunion and heartfelt gratitude. Before we began eating, Everett stood to make a toast, voice quavering with sincerity. "To family," he said, raising his glass of sparkling cider, "and to the resilience we've all shown in difficult times. Harriet, thank you for opening your home, as you always have, Yanni. And Jonah, we admire your strength in the face of hardship. This is for Corbin. Too, may he grow up surrounded by love and honesty." A lump formed in my throat as we clinked glasses. Corbin, perched in his high chair, giggled and clapped, oblivious but adding a sweet soundtrack to the moment. For once, I felt no weight of deception, no looming dread. We'd carved out a sanctuary of truth. Later, as conversations meandered, Clara leaned over and whispered, "Harriet, do you ever wonder if Rosalind will come back?" I considered her question, glancing at Jonah, who was busy demonstrating turkey slices to Corbin like a game. "Yes," I replied. "I do wonder. But I'm not afraid anymore. Jonah and I, we know who we are, and we know how to protect our family. If she returns changed, we'll face that moment with open eyes. If not, I trailed off, letting the silence speak for itself. Because for the first time in many years, I truly believed we would be okay no matter what the future held. After the guests left and Jonah had put Corbin to bed, I found myself alone in the kitchen, tidying up. I paused to look at my reflection in the window, noticing the gentle lines around my eyes and the silver in my bob hairstyle. They were reminders not just of aging, but of surviving the storms that come with loving deeply. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed on the screen. My pulse skipped. Could it be Rosalind? After all this time, cautiously, I accepted the call. A timid voice, undeniably hers, spoke on the other end. Harriet. Hi, it's me. My heart lurched. She sounded different, softer, maybe even remorseful. She admitted she'd been staying in Arizona, going through therapy to address her past trauma and harmful patterns. I just wanted to apologize, she said, her breath shaky. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I realized how much damage I caused, how I blamed you for my own fears. I'm sorry. My eyes stung with tears. Part of me longed to slam the phone down, to shield Jonah and Corbin from any new wave of heartbreak, but a stronger part, the part that believed in redemption, wouldn't let me. Thank you for saying that, I replied carefully. Where do we go from here? Rosalind explained she wasn't coming back to claim custody. Not yet. She wanted to continue therapy, to stabilize her life. Please tell Jonah I don't expect forgiveness, she said, voice trembling. But I do want him to know I'm grateful. I love Corbin. Maybe one day, when I'm ready, I'd like to write him letters. That's all. The conversation ended with no concrete plans, just a faint possibility that at least one life might be changing for the better. I stood there, phone in hand, gazing at my reflection in the dark window. Maybe this was how healing began, with a fragile, tentative attempt to make amends. I told Jonah about Rosalind's call the next morning as we shared breakfast. He listened in silence, Corbin seated in his high chair, happily mashing banana pieces. When I finished, Jonah released a slow breath. I'm not sure how to feel. Part of me is angry she's reaching out to you instead of me, but another part is relieved she's seeking help. I nodded, carefully considering my response. She said she'd like to write letters to Corbin eventually. No pressure, no demands, just letters. Maybe that's her small step toward healing. Jonah's brow furrowed, and he took a moment to spoon oatmeal into Corbin's eager mouth. If she's serious about healing, that's good. Corbin deserves a mother who's stable, if that's possible. But I need more than a phone call to believe she's really changed. His voice was firm but not cruel. It reminded me of Bartholomew, who'd always had a strong sense of moral clarity. Take your time, I suggested softly. Nobody says you have to make a decision right now, but it's your choice how to proceed. We spent the rest of the day quietly, the emotional weight hanging in the background like a low cloud. Still, there was a sense of life moving forward. Jonah had an evening shift at work, and I took Corbin to the park where he toddled around, chasing colorful leaves. Other parents and grandparents smiled, remarking on his bright personality. I felt a rush of gratitude despite the turmoil. Corbin was thriving, surrounded by love. That night, after Corbin was asleep, Jonah joined me in the living room. Mom, he said, do you think Dad would have been proud? Despite all the chaos, my eyes misted. Bartholomew would be proud of how you've stood tall, even when blindsided by betrayal. He'd be proud of the father you've become for Corbin, and the man you're becoming day by day. A faint smile touched Jonah's lips. He stepped over and wrapped me in a hug. I hope so, he whispered. We stood there in the quiet hush of a house that had seen too much pain, feeling the stirrings of a peace we'd fought hard to earn. 2 years have passed since that turbulent night when Rosalind stood at our dinner table and publicly called me controlling for protecting Jonah and Corbin's inheritance. So much has changed. Jonah continues to flourish, rising through the ranks at his marketing firm and embracing single fatherhood with unwavering devotion. Corbin is a delightful preschooler now, sporting a silly tuft of hair that Jonah trims at home, nothing fancy, but charmingly uneven in a way only a parent's handiwork can be. As for me, my short silver bob has grown into a slightly longer style, which I tuck behind my ears each morning. I've found new purpose volunteering at local community centers, teaching young parents basic finance lessons, a quiet homage to Bartholomew's legacy of safeguarding the future. Rosalind never returned to live with us, but she did follow through on her promise to write letters. Every few months, a new envelope arrives with no return address. Jonah opens them, reading a mix of news and apologies, Rosalind's slow, painstaking attempts at rebuilding a bridge. Sometimes Jonah replies via a P.O. box she provided. He doesn't hide the letters from me, but I give him privacy to decide what he wants Corbin to know. Occasionally, we wonder if the day will come when Rosalind is ready for face-to-face contact. Perhaps she'll arrive on our doorstep, hair still in those trademark waves, wearing an expression of genuine regret. Until then, we continue forward aware of the scars, but letting them remind us of our resilience rather than our pain. In quiet moments, I reflect on that microphone in my dining room, the night I found the courage to stand up and shatter the facade that kept Jonah and me apart. It was terrifying, but in exposing Rosalind's lies, I also reclaimed my own voice. I learned that love sometimes means confrontation, family sometimes means letting go, and controlling well. Maybe I am controlling in my desire to protect the people I love. Yet, in the end, that fierce devotion saved my son and grandson from a deeper disaster. And so, our story continues, one built on truth instead of secrets, on hope instead of fear. Bartholomew once told me that family, at its best, is like a well-rooted tree weathering any storm. Today, I believe that more than ever. Thank you for joining me by the fireside tonight. What an emotional roller coaster we've shared, exposing deep family secrets, witnessing heartbreaking betrayals, and ultimately learning that sometimes love means having the courage to confront painful truths head on. Rosalind's return at the end took us all by surprise, didn't it? What did you think about Harriet's decision to open her door again to the woman who almost destroyed her family? Would you have done the same? I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts on tonight's story. Share your feelings and opinions in the comments below. Your insights bring our fireside community closer together. And remember, if you haven't yet subscribed to her Fireside Stories, please click that subscribe button now and ring the bell for notifications. Your support means the world and helps me bring even more meaningful emotional journeys to life. Until next time, keep the fireside warmth alive in your hearts. Cherish your loved ones, and may your own story always find its truth. Good night, dear friends.